Raise your hand if you've ever been in a totally winning position and just blundered away a stalemate, or even worse, a loss. Right? So over the last few months, I've been trying to learn some endgames and just basic checkmate patterns and solidify them into my memory. And I just wanted to share that experience with you, share a few of the ones that I think have been most helpful and have come up most often in all of my games. And I'm just hoping that this saves you guys that one extra half point or just a few extra elo points so that you can continue climbing up that rating ladder. Enjoy. So we're going to start off this video with an example of what my friend sent me saying, hey, KD, how did I stalemate in this game? And you can see that he's actually up a ton of material, very clearly winning. He has queens everywhere. He has actually up 60 in material against white here. But the reason why this is a stalemate is because white has no more legal moves. They can't push their pawn anymore. This queen takes care of the b file. 3 queens take care of the back rank. And then these 2 queens kind of cover these 2 diagonals. And so the king has no moves. They can't push their pawn. And black played a move that doesn't check the king and doesn't allow the king to move anywhere else. So that's by definition a stalemate. And you may be asking, well, how did we get to this point where there were 4 queens on the board, both rooks, both knights, both bishops, and somehow we hadn't reached a checkmate already? And the answer is, if we scroll all the way back, you can tell that at move, all right, here we go. At move 19, my friend had already taken all of the major and minor pieces of white, but proceeded to gobble up all the other pawns and push all his pawns to promotion. And he got greedy, and eventually on move 41, he stalemated. And what this kind of shows is, once you have enough material, you should just go and force the checkmate, or else you might accidentally do the same thing here. And one of the best ways that you could have avoided this is by doing a ladder mate with 2 rooks. In fact, I've seen people actually, when they're clearly in a winning position where their opponent is totally defenseless, I've seen people promote to rooks instead of queens, strictly to avoid accidentally checkmating someone. So let's take a quick look at the ladder mate and how we could have avoided it here. So what is a ladder mate? A ladder mate is when you use the power of 2 rooks, or a rook and a queen, or 2 queens, to slowly move your opponent away from the center and towards the edge of the board. And you can do this because the rook controls entire files and entire ranks. And what this looks like is, you're going to slowly make sure that the king has no option but to move closer to the edge of the board. In the first step, they move back. So you always slowly, you see how this rook cuts off the entire 4th rank, so the king cannot move downwards, right? They, at best case, to avoid moving towards the edge of the board, they can just stay on the same rank. So we're going to keep going, and here you have to be careful, because if you just continue the ladder and zigzag up, the rook on f3 is actually not defended. King just takes. So what you have to do here is keep the pressure on the 3rd rank, but you can outrun the king. So you go over to the other side, they just go back, and you continue your ladder, and they reach the edge of the board, and it's checkmate. So just make sure, as you work your way up the side of the board, pushing the king further and further back, just make sure that your rook is not being attacked on the square that you're landing. And remember that they can always outrun the opposing king. So you can use the entire rank, outrun the king, and slowly push it until it's checkmate. So this is going to be a king and rook versus king endgame. And the key here is that, whereas in the ladder mate, you're taking 2 rooks to control 2 different ranks or files, your king has to actually control the applicable squares of one of those 2 ranks. And in this example, the white king is already cornered, and the best move here is to make sure you get closer to the king and cut off any escape square, so that the white king has no other option except to move to the one legal move, and they can't quickly get out of that control space before the rook comes in and delivers checkmate. You can see the rook takes over the whole rank, and black king takes over the applicable squares here. There's no exit, so it's mate. And of course, this is where the white king is already in the edge of the board, so it's easier to go ahead and set up mate. But you will get instances where the white king is actually in the middle of the board, and you have to slowly work your way using your king and your rook in tandem to push it to the edge of the board. The key thing here again is to make sure that your rook's always defended. One easy way to do it is make sure that it's always defended by your king, and it'll slowly limit your opponent's choices for where they can move their king, and it'll slowly edge them out to the edge of the board. The king and queen versus king endgame is very critical for beginners to understand. It's critical because you've already done all the hard work to get to the endgame up a pawn, and you've successfully promoted your pawn. And now you get into a totally winning position. You know it's winning, and you do not want to stalemate. So how do we not stalemate this, and how do we actually convert this? Well, we are going to use the power of the queen, where it controls not only a file, not only a rank, but also a diagonal, to slowly shepherd this king into a corner of the board. And then we will bring our king closer for support. And then once the king is on the actual last rank or file, we will distance our queen, cutting off any escape from the second to last rank or file, bring our king even closer, and then deliver mate. So it's going to look something like this. You can see here, there's a square, right? And the king kind of has a choice to move up or down. Let's just say they move up. We will keep our distance, but slowly move at least one file over. And each move, you're essentially going to make progress by moving one file over or one rank up. So in this case, it's going to be a rank. And let's just say here. Then we keep pushing. And now they're kind of stuck in this corner. They cannot escape from the D file, and they cannot escape from the fourth rank, right? So at this point, we bring our king closer for support, and you shoulder the king. So now we control all three of these squares. They have no space because this is controlled, and they have no space left on the second most rank, so they push back. And now it is very important that we cut off their escape from that from the A file. And the reason why we do this is because they will always have space to move. And it's very important that we do it from a distance, because if we went in closer, then we might accidentally stalemate. If we keep a distance, they will always have space to move laterally, or I guess vertically in this instance. And now we will bring our king in nice and close and deliver mate. But just one thing to watch out for, right, is if you get into this position. Let's see. If you get into this position, do not move your king first, right? You use your king to shoulder the opposing king to the back rank, but once they're at the back rank or side file, that's when you distance your queen, but still cut off the exit. Because if you move this king closer, thinking that you're going to deliver mate on the next turn, this is actually a stalemate, because your king controls these squares, your queen cuts off any other escape route, but the white king is not in check. So it's very critical. Again, at this point, when they back up, you distance the queen and cut off the exit route. They kind of toggle back between a couple squares, and then you come in and deliver mate. So I hope that helps. This is a very critical one. So if you need to pause and rewatch this segment again, feel free to do so, and we'll keep moving along. The back rank mate is the fun one, just because it's very simple. Once you start seeing it once, you'll always be able to see it. It's just a matter of whether you recognize it in the middle of a game. And for instance, in this situation right here, you can see that the opponent clearly castled at some point, brought their rook out, and is now attacking your rook. And I mean, I don't know why they're attacking your rook, but this is one of the puzzles that chess.com has. And in this instance, you can see that in the past, when we had a rook and king checkmate, well, the king was the one that was cutting any escape square off for the opposing king, and the rook was delivering checkmate. in this instance, instead of your king being the reason why the king can't move to a different rank or file, it's their pawns that are preventing it. So in the same move, you can't move a pawn and get your king out. So no matter what the material count is, if you just give a check in the back rank and the king can't move anywhere, it's effectively mate. In this instance, this is a forced move, and that's checkmate. So it's very easy to forget about if you're in a game, you castle, you're working on whatever's going on in the middle of the board. Just always remember that that's a vulnerability for both yourself and for your opponent. So here I just wanted to give you guys one more example of a back rank mate, solely because even though in the middle of a game you have a lot going on, a lot to consider, you always have to worry about your back rank vulnerability, or you can always be looking for your opponent's back rank vulnerability. So here he brought his queen over, and I could tell he was stacking his queen and rook to form a battery, but at this point I was saying I'm not worried. In fact, I know that if he trades queen and rook, I actually have this back rank option, right? So I actually pushed my pawn, threatening his knight, encouraging him to take, and he fell for the bait. And once his rook left his back rank, this was totally undefended, and I delivered mate and won. And it just shows that even though, the puzzle will give you a mate in 1 or mate in 2, it needs to be able to be fed into your decisions as you make trades and make decisions during the middle of your games. So it's a nice way to win, especially if you're behind in material. I was down a pawn before all this went down, and it's just important to think about as you go through your games. So the last mate that we're going to look at is a battery mate. So this is when your queen forms a battery with a bishop or a rook on the same diagonal or the same rank or file, and it essentially enhances the strength of the queen. And if the only defender of a square is the king and they're on, towards the back rank or so, oftentimes, right, if your opponent is castled and you're able to successfully form a battery, you can actually deliver mate by going in with queen. It's only defended by the king, and the king has nowhere to go. So that's one way that you can create an attack that's forcing, is basically making sure that your queen's defended by the battery, right? And this is very simple. This is a simple example, but you'll see in this example it's a little bit more complex, where the queen and bishop aren't connected yet, but they do connect on e6. So when the queen goes and delivers check on e6, it's a battery, is defended. The king must move, and then here you can actually see a battery of both types, because we will bring the rook in, the knight has to defend, the queen must defend, and you mate with a rook and queen battery. So in this example, we use both. It wasn't mate with the bishop and the queen, but it was a forcing move that ultimately let us create a new battery, which did deliver mate. So it is a way to create an attack and create a threat. It doesn't always end in mate. For example, in this example, we could have, as black, if we flip the board, instead of playing pawn takes e5, we could have just said, okay, well, we know that they're lined up towards this for mate. Let's avoid it by pushing a pawn up. So that's one way to avoid it, and one way to defend against it. But it's always good to know when your opponent is creating a battery and where it's lined up towards. We reached the end of another video here on Kdlearns, and if you liked what you saw, please hit the like button below, hit subscribe, and if you want to join me live, then go to twitch.tv/Kdlearns. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and we have a good time, so feel free to check me out there, and hope you guys can use what you learned or reinforced today to continue climbing that rating ladder.